What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Pro vs. Pro, the only show in the industry where you can get data-driven analysis from two professional golfers. Really excited to be here with you tonight, Justin. We missed you last week, but at least we hit on the Siwoo Kim outright. So what do you think? Can we kind of repeat that this week and get another outright hit?
I love it. Siwoo is probably the only one that's still playing on the PGA Tour that I actually have like daily or weekly conversations with. So to see
Awesome.
him win and then to find out that you were on him as well, and it worked out really good. I know he's put in a lot of work this offseason. He's been doing a lot of more of the physical training stuff.
Love that.
And then to find out that you know that you were on him as well, it all makes sense. I think he's in for a huge year.
I
People
love
forget
that.
how young he is.
Yeah. It's funny, like we haven't talked about this yet. So I'm now suddenly extremely interested to hear more about this training that he's gone through. So would you say that that win was something that you saw coming as well?
Actually, I think I didn't see it coming that soon.
Okay.
I have him circled for the Masters. That's what I have him circled
Nice.
for.
Nice.
Um,
I love that you say that too, because one of the reasons why I was on him last week was because the course fit model pointed to around the green play, and we've talked about it before. Augusta is another course that around the green play is really pointed to in the course fit model. So I might be with you on that Siwoo Kim Masters bet. In fact, maybe we should end up at some point on this show tonight looking what his futures are, and we can use our prop shop at FTN to do so. So that's on the list. We've got a lot to get to on this show, but yeah, let's hear a little bit more about Siwoo. What kind of training has he been doing?
so I just know he started working with a local golf trainer here in DFW. We used to play the Texas State Open at Castle Hills. He lives right out that way. He practiced at TPC Four Seasons. Great dude. I wish the world got to know him a little bit better because he really is a good dude. Obviously language barrier, just got married. But I know he's worked hard this off season. I hate the way he putts. Man, it makes me cringe. But I think it's the best for him, and I think he is. I mean, he's just a great human being, in my opinion, and I was super happy to see him win. And I think, like I said, when he won the Players, that was kind of his breakout.
Yeah.
What was he, 21 or 2? I mean, he can't. I mean,
He's young.
Super young.
Yeah.
And I think he's got a huge, huge year ahead of him.
And the thing about a win like that is, we've talked previously about how there is a skill to winning, and when you have a win that young at Sawgrass in the Players Championship, like you have to be so dialed in and have the confidence and the commitment to every single swing and shot to close out a win on 17th, 18th hole there. So immediately, just from that, we knew all along he's got the skill of knowing how to win.
He's not scared of the moment at all. I mean, as bad as it sounds, he broke his putter at the Masters while in fourth or something. Like he's out there to compete and win. I mean, and we were talking. So we had a discussion today. I played golf for the first time in a long time today, and we had a discussion today. The best swings on the PGA Tour at this moment, and I would say he has to be in the top 5 conversation.
It's pretty. It's a little bit timing dependent, but because of that, like he gets in those stretches where he's just dialed, and like the way he started that Sunday round where he birdies the first 4 and then misses a 4-footer on a really difficult par 3 for birdie because he just threw yet another dart on a 220-yard par 3. Yeah, that was really awesome to watch. And it's funny because you and I were talking backstage right before we went live here that one of the cool things about this show that this dynamic that you and I have now is, we oftentimes get to the same place with very different process. And it's funny that you have this like inside information on Siwoo Kim and how hard he's been working and how devoted he is to his craft. And I called him a potential breakout in one of my articles this morning, betting him again this week because I kind of see that in the data. I see the fact that, hey, this is a guy who previously every now and then kind of caught fire with his irons, and now all of a sudden we're seeing it come together and it's more consistent. And you add in the fact that he's a really good player off the tee, drives the ball long and straight. He's elite around the green, and his big weakness is the part of golf that's the least stable, putting. Like that all spells the kind of breakout that we saw, from Scotty Scheffler, from Sam Burns, guys of that nature. So it would be really cool to see if that comes to fruition, because we both are on it now. And again, as you said, like in very different paths to that conclusion.
So a guy like Siwoo, not specific to Siwoo, I'm gonna point to him more. Sorry, trying to get the door closed. I'm gonna point to him more in the tricky green situation. So like last week, like Augusta, where you can have a 6-footer that you might have to play 2 cups outside, right? So that's where I'm gonna focus. I mean, once again, the players, same idea, right? Small, undulated. There's not very many like 10-footers that are right edge.
Yep.
If you got a 10-footer, there's something to it. So I'm gonna wait and point more to him. That being said, I think I sent you one of my outrights. Is I played Siwoo this week in an outright, or not in an outright, in a matchup. I think that he'll play good. The way that his mind works, I don't see him as like, hey, I won, I'm out there gonna go have a good time, like I'm not gonna focus. I think he's more of the like, I'm playing really good, let me go get what I can get right this second. So I think that culture and time frame and mentality is huge. So I don't mind you going back to Siwoo this week. Like at those kind of odds, I think he's a exception to the rule of going back. I don't think he wins this week personally, but knowing you and knowing how your mind works and the data that you have, I would never ever say, "Oh, you're all wrong there." Right? I mean, he's definitely. And you know me, I'm totally against the back-to-back theory. I'm usually running from them.
So first of all, to be clear, I don't think he's going to win this week. I just think he has a better chance than the 40-1 number that I got on him. So that's why I made the bet. But yeah, I was surprised to see that you have Siwoo at -110 over KH Lee this week for that exact reason. You and I have talked in the past that you do not like using guys, whether it's DFS, betting, coming off wins. So I did want to have that discussion because I think you and I disagree there most of the time, but I also, that's like one of the very few narratives that I will lean into some of the time. And that's because like I've personally experienced it. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you was, what has your personal experience been coming off wins? Like, have you found that you are suddenly less motivated, less focused? Are you taking time off? Like, what's going through your mind after a win?
So there's 2 sides, and I think it was where I was in my career dependent, right? So later in my career, when it all came together and it happened, I was more like, man, it's about time. I'm gonna go dominate. Younger in my career, I was like, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Yep.
And so I'm gonna have a great time tonight. I just made, I don't have any money. I'm living in a car, and I just made $20,000. It's gonna show up on my, in my bank account. I'm gonna go have a good time the next 3 days.
Right.
I'll get the pro-am on Wednesday type of deal. So I think a lot of that is age and dependent and mentality. I think mentality is huge, and I think even for tour players, another guy that I know personally is Brendan Todd, and when he goes, and when he goes bad, he goes bad, and he's well aware of the situation. He knows that that's kind of, and he's been to the depths for a guy that to play at the level that he has. I mean, mentally, like I know his brother-in-law very well. We played together a ton. His brother-in-law played at Auburn, great golfer in his own sense. He struggled. I didn't know that he would ever come back, and now I think you're finding him I'm big on him this week. This is a good course fit for him, coming off a good play. But he knows that he needs to take advantage because you never know. You might wake up one morning and it's all gone.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing in a G Pro event either 3-4 years ago, something like that. Brendan Todd was in the group in front of me, and it was like a short par 3. And I remember he had missed. It was probably like 130 yards, and he had missed at least 30 yards right of the green, not 30 yards right of the target, 30 yards right of the green. And his chip came up short of the green again. And he just starts banging his wedge into the ground. Like,
Yeah.
man, well, nobody wants to go through what he's going through right now.
And all the demons, and you're talking about an elite player. Like, he's
Yeah.
not somebody that is just like Joe Schmo. He's
Mhm.
really, really good. So,
Yeah.
um,
I was late to kind of believe in his resurgence because I had that picture in my head of him banging the wedge
but
and the guy like, I can't bet on this guy no matter what he's doing.
and then we always talk about personal experience. They're always going to supersede anything that you can look at and see.
Mhm.
Like, you know, um, I see it all. There's a few guys that are still playing on tour that I'm like, man, they have done a hell of a job to stay there and what they've done. And I would have never thought, I would have thought they would have won earlier, but never stayed there
Right.
as long as they have. Brian Stewart is a great example.
Mhm.
I mean, we used to play a Hooters Tour event in Guatemala City, and I was like, man, he is struggling. And that's in 05, oh
Wow.
six. And I was like, and then, I had a couple years where I got paired with Bryce Garnett in the Adams Tour back then. It was Tight Lies Tour, whatever. I don't remember the name. It's changed names so many times at that time, but we got paired together every week. And I was like, this dude is really good.
Yeah.
And then he got his, he worked hard, got his tour card. Well, then he never really won. I don't, I mean, you would probably agree he's never really broken out.
Right.
But I mean, I'd love to know the exact stats on how long he's had his PGA Tour card. I bet it's 8 or 10 years
Well, yeah, and I heard from so many guys like while I was playing that it's a hell of a lot easier to keep your card than to get your card.
for sure.
And maybe that's going to change now that it's only like 70, I think, that keeps your card instead of 120, 125, whatever it's been. But yeah, definitely easier to keep it in part because you just have so many more tournaments to get the job done, or instead of like you've got 1 week at Q school to get the job done to get your card. So
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, a prime example is a guy like Justin Lower. Like, he played a million events. He played almost every week, but he had to keep playing to make sure he made enough
right,
money to stay out there.
right.
And a guy with that much talent, he's eventually going to play good.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
and it's almost like knowing that you can play that many events when you're that good, you don't have to feel the pressure to get it done at any point in time because like that your talent is going to get you there eventually, as you said.
right.
Um, Back to the discussion on what it's like coming off a win. Like my personal experience coming off a win was, as you said, dependent on kind of where I was at in my career, but also what type of event it was. Like if when I won mini tour events, it was the check is small. You're not making very much. You don't get anything whatsoever in terms of status. It's not like you win and suddenly you're exempt into this event and this event. So it was kind of just business as usual. You have to go to the next event. When I won the Pennsylvania Open, there was a little bit more kind of fanfare, if you will, around the win. And I drove 10 hours to a match play event, mini tour event, like 3 days later, something like that. And I was still feeling really good then. Made it to the quarterfinals. Was playing well enough to make it to the semis of the match play, and the guy I was playing against birdied 6 of the last 7 or something like that, including the first or the second playoff hole, knocked me out. After that, I kind of just was like, I got home, drove 10 hours home from that. I was like, I don't want to touch a golf club for 2 weeks minimum,
Yeah.
right? And so for me, like there was a delayed reaction to it, but still a reaction. And then you hear someone like JJ Spawn talk about after he won last year, he didn't touch a club for a week, and he just kind of was in the mindset that, like, as soon as he picked up a club again, he would just play exactly that well. And he struggled for like a month. So certainly, like there's enough anecdotal evidence to say, hey, this narrative, like it's not just an empty narrative. There's real data behind it to some degree. But as you said, I think we have to weigh the player, their personality, the time of year, what the win means for their career. Like Siwoo has been off for months, and this is the first week back. He wins. Now he's playing in a better field. It's not like he needs to rest up and refresh. So I think he's got a really, really good chance this week. Um, Quan, why don't you throw up my outrights for the week? I'll talk a little bit about the course fit model here. The course fit model for the Amex. There are 3 courses this week, and the nice thing is they are all similar in what aspects of golf they really emphasize. So the stadium course from Pete Dye, no surprise, as with every other Pete Dye course that I have looked at, there's a real emphasis on around the green play. But there's also an extreme emphasis, especially on the non-stadium course here for the Amex PGA West, on driving, both driving distance and driving accuracy. Small decrease in the weight for approach play, and then a slightly larger decrease in the weight for putting here. So both aspects of driving, around the green play. Still want good iron players, and I don't care that much about putting. So for me, this week is kind of all about kind of that same thing. And as I mentioned a number of times, I love the each way bets. And so basically, like, there were a number of instances for me this week where I could have gotten a slightly higher number. So for example, I've got Siwoo Kim at 40-1 on Bet Rivers, where I'm getting this each way bet. So if he comes in the top 5 but doesn't win, I still get paid out at 5 or at 1/5 of this 40-1 number. Really like that. I was able to get 45-1 at PointsBet, I think it was, if I wanted it. Maybe it was BetMGM. But also Luke List, Dean Burmeister, both of those guys I was able to get at 150 elsewhere. But I wanted those placement points, kind of like I did last week with David Lipsky. He was available at 150 elsewhere, took the each way at 125. That each way placement hit. So was happy with that one. But you can see a very clear pattern here on all these picks. They're all course fit specialists. Siwoo, Wise, really good off the tee, really good around the greens, both solid with their irons. Pendrith just dominates off the tee. Luke List dominates off the tee, is terrible with his putter, so it's nice to have that reprieve that he doesn't have to do it. That he doesn't have to kind of have that putting prowess this week. And then kind of the exact same story for both Burmeister and Byung Hanan. Very curious to hear your thoughts.
I love on. I mean,
I was
just like
about to ask you,
like that's a huge number on him here, and
yeah,
I mean that's an out of hand number. I mean, 100-1 fine, 200-1. Like I always back myself into something like, hey, could this guy win 1 out of 200 times with this field here at this place? And I would say with him, absolutely. After what he's done to get back to where he's at, I could see him being really dialed in early in the year, getting back onto these courses that he likes. And quick question, have you heard what they're doing with the greens this year? There, do you?
No.
Okay, I didn't know if the surface, if there was any, they were throwing any overseed on them.
Oh, yes, I do know they're overseeded.
Are they fully overseeded? Last year they did like some kind of light sprinkling last year.
Yeah,
It wasn't full. It wasn't the full like green lush overseed as the year before. It was. I haven't heard exactly what they're doing.
I know that even though they didn't do the full overseed last year, that Josh found a higher correlation to putting on Bent and one other than Bermuda, which basically says, hey, there's smoother greens, less grain to worry about.
Yeah, and with that, I would probably say they're flat surfaces outside of the stadium course.
Yeah.
Compared to what you see a lot of other places. I think the stadium course adds that the Pete Dye dynamic, right, of the little bit more undulation and stuff. I was just curious to see. I mean, Aaron Wise is an interesting play. I think I like him more betting than I do in DFS, just because where he falls.
Yeah, he's priced up there in DFS, but it'll be. I think ownership this week is going to be really, really interesting because there are a number of guys who, like Wise, it's like you really like the outlook for the player, but he's at kind of an awkward price where maybe most of the field overlooks him to the point where, like, I wouldn't surprise me if Wise was 15%. It wouldn't surprise me if Wise was 7%. And at 15%, I'm probably not going there. At 7%, he might be one of my favorite plays on the slate.
So I will go with another person that I feel the exact same way, and it kind of goes against what you're saying about putting, but Jason Day. Moonballs it off
I
the
like him
tee.
too.
Super him and Aaron Wise off the tee are so similar. Their ball doesn't curve. They hit it through the moon and hit it pretty far. I don't know Jason Day's motivation. I don't know what he's been doing this winter. I know he moved back to Ohio a couple years ago now. I don't know how much practice he's done. You live in the north. It's not like me in Texas. It's been 75 here for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Up it's not the same as being up there where you're at. I don't know how much work he's getting in or what he's doing. But as far as like in an interesting price range, I think he's high sevens in DraftKings, which is the only thing I can play on.
It's so funny that you went to Jason Day because their stroke scan profiles are almost identical.
They're
Like,
the
Wise
same.
is a little bit longer off the tee. He's a little bit more accurate off the tee. They're almost exactly identical in their approach and around the green numbers. And then Jason Day is a slightly better putter, but both are above average. So really funny that you went to Jason Day. I really like him. He's going to be one of my favorite DFS plays as well. I looked at his outright number and basically thought, I don't know that the win upside is there at the number. He's it's weird to say because historically, like,
He's a
been
winner.
a fairly volatile guy, but I feel much better about his floor for DFS than I do his ceiling for an outright bet.
And I would agree. And that's kind of what I feel about Aaron Wise. I think like I'd feel better about a top 25 than I do a win. And then there was one other guy that I kind of had circled in that range, and that's depends on which site you look at, SHCAM, SECAM, the other Kim that's kind of down there. That I think he finished like T23 last week, somewhere in that range, and he kind of gets overlooked, and I don't really understand why he fails to get noticed. And that's the truth. Like, I feel like he just kind of flies by the wayside. No, you never hear anybody talk about him. I don't know if it's the name confusion, I really don't. I've got no good answer, but I think he's like mid 700s, and I mean, I think that he's got the talent to break out at some point this year to compete and win. I mean, go back and look at his tournament history. It's pretty solid. I had it pulled up. It's 12th last week. And then before that, a bunch of mid 40s, a couple of 60s. He did miss the cut in Bermuda, but 4th at the Shriners, 13th at Sanderson, 36th at Fortnite. I mean, like, he can, or Fortinet, but you get my point. Like, he can obviously get it on with those guys.
If his irons start to click at any point in time, he'll be there because he makes a ton of putts. He drives it pretty well. He's shown flashes of being very good around the green. I still have his baseline around the green at negative 0.04, but there have been times where it's like, man, this guy has a lot of talent around the green. He's gained in 2 straight events. Like, why is he still negative long term? But then he'll go on and lose like half a stroke the next event. So,
and I feel like it's a huge comfort deal. Like, it's almost like there's certain situations where he gets super comfortable and is really good, and others where he's not. I mean, grass type's probably a huge deal if you really wanted to dig into that. I'm not. I more tend to look at how they're playing and their ability. I just think he's a guy that could get going, especially on overseeded greens where he could just go. He's in that same low 700 price range, and I'm more talking DFS than I am outright for that. But like, if you're gonna give me him under 7,500, like, I'm gonna roster him a lot.
yeah.
I mean, I think him, Brendan Todd, I think Jason Day is high sevens, Todd's mid sevens, and Kim's low sevens. But like, you can tell me you can give me those 3 in a lineup and put Rom and Cantlay in a DFS lineup, and then get somebody, like, I think, who'd I mention you, Eckroat or Alexander earlier today.
Yep.
You can get all those guys in there together. Like, I just don't. I think the upside is really, really, really high.
It's kind of a perfect segue to the main topic that I want to get to on this show. Last week, I talked a lot about the narrative that was going around the industry that some trend was like 8 of the last 9 winners or something like that of the Sony Open had played the previous week, and I said, hey, hold on a second, that's just selection bias because all the best players, the top 10 in DraftKings pricing last week had all played the previous week. Guys who played the previous week continued to win that event because they were the best players in the field. Siwoo Kim was also one of the best players in the field. The fact that he hadn't played the week before didn't mean squat to me, and sure enough, he was able to win. So I'm glad that narrative was dispelled. The one I want to talk about this week is something I've heard a lot of around the industry, basically saying like, hey, over the last 6 to 12 months, we're seeing a lot fewer winners come from that long shot range, the 80 to 1, 120 to 1, or even higher range. And the vast majority of winners are coming between 10 to 1 and like 50 to 1. And my first question to you is, have you noticed the same pattern? Do you feel like we are seeing fewer long shots win?
Well, I mean, I'm going to preface this with saying, like, I'm not a big outrights guy, as the beginning, that's just not. I I think that Vegas does a horrible job on outrights, and you'd never get a fair odds on anybody. But that's a different story. As far as that narrative, I think that, yeah, you could say, okay, we're getting way more 50 to 1 or less winners than normal, but I would also say you're getting way more 30 to 50 to 1 winners than normal.
Mm-hmm.
So I would turn this around and saying that I think that our elite talent is getting deeper.
Yeah.
Therefore, the long shots are harder, or your true long shots. And no offense to the great players that are in this field that are, 200 to 1,
Mm-hmm.
they're all really, really good, but you're getting more. I mean, look at it this way: Siwoo Kim, President's Cup player, you can get 40 to 1 on him this week. Like, he's a elite player, and you can get 40 to 1 on because you have Rom, Cantlay, Schauffele, Scheffler. You've got all these guys. So I would argue that my argument would be, sure, you might be getting less 100 plus 1 to odds winners, but you're getting way more, 30 to 50 to 1 winners. I mean, my point to you earlier was, if John Rahm played in Tiger's era, the exact same group of people, we'd be talking about John Rahm, not Tiger Woods. Now, that's probably a little bit of exaggeration because what Tiger did in clutch moments, but Tiger won. I didn't bet then. I don't know anything about his odds or what they were in Vegas then, but I bet he went off at 4 or 5 to 1 in some of those
Even
events.
lower at times, yeah.
I
In fact,
mean,
I think there were like 1 or 2 events where he was like minus 150 or something like that.
like, just obnoxious, right? In
Yeah.
the game of golf.
Mhm.
Like, if knowing what you know and know what we know now, that's obnoxious. But he he was that good. But so you either saw Tiger win in his, let's call it 8 to 1 or better a lot, or you all of a sudden saw a guy win at 200 to 1.
Mhm.
So sure, you saw a lot more 200 to 1s, but you never saw a guy win between 25 to 1 and 70 to 1.
Right.
You never saw anybody in that range. It was always long shots or somebody, because there was nobody in that range, really. You had your favorites, and then your, one other, whoever, you had your Tiger at 2 to 1 and your Phil at 10 to 1, and then everybody else was a million to 1.
Right.
So I just think that the depths of the fields, and I think Vegas is more scared of the outrights. That's why they don't post the numbers that that some of these guys belong at. I think that has a lot to do with it. Vegas has realized that they don't want to lose all their money at one time. And that's
Mhm.
how you do it, is outrights, right? These big
I
outrights, they're.
will I will push back on that though, because I think there are a lot of books who do price that way, but there are also books that don't. And that's why we've pointed to odds shopping as being crucial when betting outrights, because like the Ben On number, for example, 200 to 1 on Bet Rivers, I think that was as low as 150 elsewhere. And
I can only get it at 100. I looked at when
yeah,
you said that I looked at I can only get it at 100. Now I live in
and
Texas. It's a little bit different. Everything is done different, but
yeah, and like the Taylor Pendrith number, 100 to 1, that was, I think the second best number was 85. I think the third best number was 70. So there are books who hang higher numbers, and so it is beatable in that way. And I think that's, I finished last season up over 50 units on outright bets with the Siwoo Kim bet. I'm right there so far this year. But yeah,
and a lot of
so
that is being able to get those, right? You have to be able to
absolutely,
get those. So like, I
yes.
mean, where I'm at, yeah, Pendrith for me is 77 to 1.
Mhm.
So I mean, you're talking about, I mean, that's big. 100 to
It's
1
huge.
if you hit one, I mean, 23 unit if if you're betting whatever your unit size is, it doesn't really even matter when that's a huge difference. And I think that's important for anybody listening is to understand the difference of where you're getting it and what you're doing and understanding the math and
Mhm.
what all it takes. If you're getting, let's call it 25% better numbers than what I'm getting, that's just a way better rate. And that's probably why I don't it's probably why I
Mhm.
don't play many of them. I mean, to
I
be
agree.
honest.
Yeah, and in which
Um,
case I think it's the right choice. Getting back to this discussion on the narrative as a whole, I think everything that you said kind of supports exactly what my thought on it is. So first, a little bit of clarity on why I have such an issue with the narrative that's going around. It's because it's not that it's simply, hey, they're winning less often, done. It's that there's this implication that you therefore shouldn't bet long shots and you should focus all of your bets on the 10 to 50 to 1 range. And what you're saying is exactly what I'm saying, that the reason that this trend, if it's even true, I don't know that it's true. I haven't gone back and checked, but if it is true, it's because the talent is deeper. It's because there are more guys who deserve to be priced between 10 and 50 to 1. And I think the best way to kind of look at this is like maybe 3 years ago, the if you had a field that was 150 people, maybe there were 15 guys between 10 to 1 and 30 to 1 or 40 to 1. And now maybe that number has doubled. And so think about how much of the win equity overall now lives in that 10 to 30, 10 to 40, 10 to 50 to 1 range compared to what it used to be. And so that also therefore means that there are fewer guys who are long shots and have a chance to win. So the fact that we're seeing fewer doesn't mean that the guys who still are in that range are suddenly worse bets. It just means that where the other win equity is coming has changed. So for example, like if a guy is priced at 100 to 1, you basically need him to be able to win 1 out of 100 times. If you think that his chance of winning is 1.5% or 2%, he's still a really good bet. It doesn't matter if the other 98 to 98.5% of win equity is coming from that 10 to 50 to 1 range or from other guys who are similarly priced to him. None of that matters. All that matters is a player's chance of winning relative to his odds. And for me, that's why I'm going to continue to bet these guys like Siwoo. I'm going to continue to bet the guys that I have this week and Ben On, Luke List, Dean Burmeister, Taylor Pendrith, all those guys. Because I think this narrative is a bunch of crap. It's just more selection bias, just like last week's narrative.
and I agree 100%. And not just that, but I think that what you do that is so good that people overlook is that you're picking winner. You're picking people that win. They know how to win at long odds. You're not picking people that have never won. You're not looking at some dude that Monday qualified that's never played in a tour event at 5,000 to 1 to donate your money to. You're looking at, I mean, Ben On has won at the highest
Yeah.
levels. Like he is a winner. He's not going to be afraid to win. And you're getting him at 200 to 1. So, I mean, I just looked, I could get Rom right now at 6 to 1. Like anybody that plays that is just like,
Yeah.
even if he wins, like he's not winning this golf tournament 1 out of 6 times in this field. Like he's not. Now
Yeah.
he'll probably finish in the top 10 almost every one of them, and you're going to be like, well, he was close. It was only one shot or one putt or one this or one that because he's that good. But 6-1, like you're never going to get me to back a guy. Ask that guy about betting the Chargers live up 27-0.
Yeah.
I mean,
I could get 6.5 at PointsBet or DraftKings, but no, thank you. That is not anywhere close to a meaningful enough difference for me. It'd be really funny if you went to his each way at 5.5 to 1 on Bet Rivers, and you hope for the top 5 that pays out at basically like 100.
yeah, even money.
Yeah. But yeah, I think let's talk a little bit more about Ben On, because I like the fact that we were talking earlier about Brendan Todd, and I think that we can draw a similarity here in the sense that he's a little bit binary in the sense that, like, either he's going to get it back and be the guy that he once was, or he's not. And of course there's room for somewhere in between. Like, he can be far better than he was in 2021 or for a lot of the Korn Ferry Tour season last year and still not get back quite to what he was before, but it's more binary than what we usually see. So for him to be priced at 200 to 1, like, that number pretty much says to me he's got no chance of being the Ben On that he once was. And that's just not what I see. And it's also really interesting. I don't know if you noticed this. He had his best putting performance ever last week. It was the first time he had ever gained over 1.5 strokes per round putting. Do you take anything strong from that?
The putting side of that, no. The only thing that I take from that is the mental side of it.
Yeah.
And this is where we're kind of different, and you're looking at numbers. I'm looking at what has that done for him mentally going into this week, and I'd love to know how his putting stats inside 5 feet last week. That's what I really care about, which obviously they have to be good. If he gained 1.5 shots in the field, I would guess they were really good. I think that those two is an absolutely perfect comparison. And I think that they're both it's crazy that I ended up on both of them this week. Like, they're both super high in what, are going to be in what I play in DFS. I think Ben On will return to a top 75 player in the world. I think he'll win once a year. I mean, can we throw JJ? You mentioned him earlier. Can we throw JJ Spawn into this conversation of went down the bad road and then all of a sudden found it again and won again? And we always thought that he was elite talent. We always thought he was really good, and then he just fell off. And he could have just, all of these on Todd Spawn, they had plenty of money. They could have just rode off into the sunset, and they grinded their way back. So, those are 3 guys that, I love to root for. I'm going to pick my battles as far as when I back them. And I mean, I think that, they're just similar players going into this week. I can't wait to see how Brendan Todd can get those irons going like no human you'll ever. Well, I mean, so fun to watch.
There was a time in 2020 where Ben On's 50 round moving average was 1.4 true strokes gained per round. And there was a time in 2021 where it fell below 1 stroke lost per round. I'm looking now at Spawn. Spawn kind of bottomed out in 2020 at negative 1.2, and he is now at plus 1.1. So yeah, we can throw Spawn into that same group. I bet Todd is even more extreme than that, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, he got to where he couldn't hit a pitching wedge on the green.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, I mean,
negative 3.3 at one point in 2019. And it was probably lower than that because that's probably not counting like the miscuts on the G Pro Tour that he had.
Yeah.
And now he's at plus 0.8 and reached as high as looks like plus 0.8 is pretty much his peak. Or actually, He got to plus 1.5, kind of late 2020. So yeah, unbelievable turnaround. But that's the kind of thing with Ben on. Like it can happen quickly, and it just has to be something that clicks. And so, like, Ben on had a really good finish last week. If he suddenly has a top 10 this week, we're not going to see 200 to 1 on him again.
No.
It could crash as low as 100 to 1 immediately, maybe even something like 70 to 80. So yeah, I really like that. Might be my favorite bet of the week, even though it's obviously the least likely to hit.
Well, and it's just like it goes back to you. Yeah, I know you value your numbers and you look at your numbers, but you're picking people that know how to win too. Like you understand the human element of winning, and you know that he is, if he gets in the position on Sunday, he's not going to be afraid to win.
Right. Right.
And that's a really, like, you do a really, really good job of let's take these numbers, and I'm going to be really analytical about these numbers, but I'm going to take people when it comes time that know how to win. And I think that's the biggest deal about backing somebody like him. I mean, he, I think, I hope Pendrith can be that person too. Like, I think he
Yeah.
has the talent to really win, but I'm not sure that we've seen it yet. But I think,
So I think one thing I'll say on that is it's not to me that like I have a number spit out to me and I bet it no matter what, or that I have a number spit out to me and I then say, okay, is this somebody who can win or somebody who can't win? And I either make the bet or not make the bet because of that. I'm doing my best to incorporate that, to incorporate this skill of winning, to incorporate the knowledge of what is this guy's persona like when he gets into that situation. Will he be afraid of the moment, or will he stay committed to shots? And will he be able to kind of execute his game plan and stay aggressive? I kind of actually like comparing it to NFL head coaches who I think make cowardly decision after cowardly decision. Like, I want a guy in the moment who's not going to suddenly punt on 4th and 1 from the opponent's 40 when he's somebody who typically would go for it on 4th and 2 from his own 40 just because it's in that moment. I want the guy who's going to stick to who he is in that moment. But again, I'm trying to incorporate that into the number, and then I'm just trying to bet probabilistically. I like 200 to 1 on Ben on because I think he should be more like 120, 140. I like Taylor Pendrith at 100 to 1 because I think he should be more like 75 to 80. It's not like if Taylor Pendrith was, if the best number that I could get on Pendrith was 75, that I'd still be betting because I think he's going to win. I just like this number from a probabilistic standpoint.
and I would actually argue with on more than others. Like, I would say on would be backable down to $1.25 range. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he's the outlier here in the situation like you're talking about, but like he's backable at a lower number, in my opinion. Speaking in comparison to NFL, you must love Andy Reid because he will go. I mean, he's proven to be the best coach in
Yeah.
those situations. So,
I do.
exactly.
I like him
I
playing.
know you. I know you hate that as a Eagles fan, but
I really don't. There was a time where I didn't want him to have that much success, and then I realized, you know what, he gave us a lot of good years, and it was time to move on. And so I'm okay rooting for the big guy now.
yeah, he a great coach. Yeah, and I think that you guys are facing one of the best coaches of the league this week.
We are. I think we
Um,
have one of the best, but I also think Daboll is he might be in his own tier. Like, there's a chance he's already the best coach in the NFL.
I mean, it's the same team that won 4 games last year. Like,
It
the
really
exact
is.
same team.
What he did for Daniel Jones is unreal.
I mean, so sorry to get off topic, but yeah, I mean, like I like it's a great NFL week too. So I know you'll be rooting hard. I'll probably be. I'd love to see Daniel Jones and Isaiah Hodgins move on, but um, no, I think that the golf discussion is interesting. We haven't talked too much about the top tier guys of who you like
Yeah.
this week.
Yep.
I'd like to kind of with the price of on and Todd in DraftKings, I was able to stack a couple of top guys into mine. I went with Cantlay and Rom in the same lineup. I would love to kind of get your opinion on that. I mean, you know the way I feel about Rom. I think he is the elite talent. And then Cantlay, I just feel like for what we have for the course is the right one over Scheffler and some of those other guys.
So it was actually kind of by design that we haven't talked about this upper range yet, because the last point that I want to make on the point about this like narrative that, hey, you have to pick guys between 10 and 50 to 1 is notice how many more guys you now have to choose from if that's your strategy. Like if all you said was, okay, I'm only going to bet between 10 to 1 and 30 to 1 for the rest of the year. And when I say between 10 to 1 and 30 to 1, I'm kind of just grouping all those favorites. So let's, because Rahm is at 6.5, let's say between 5 and 1 and 30 to 1 for the rest of the year. And that's your strategy. In past years, maybe that meant that in a field like, or in a tournament like this, that you were picking between 7 or 8 guys. And now it's like you're picking between 17. I mean, or more, whatever it is. Like there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 guys in this field who have an expected strokes gained over 1.2 in my models. Last year, this event probably had 3 or 4 there, and there are 6 who are over 2 expected strokes gained: Zalatoris, Schauffele, Cantlay, Finau, Scheffler, Rahm. These fields are stacked. They're going to be this way throughout the entire season. So again, the more you hear that narrative, the more you should just throw it out, forget it. Pick guys who you think have a probabilistic advantage at their numbers. Nothing else matters.
I want one more opinion. Texas guy Sam Burns. I love me some Sam Burns this week. And I think I got him at like 35 to 1. It's going to be probably one of the 10 outrights I play all year. I think he's elite level, and he hasn't he's obviously very good in the eyes, but I don't think he gets the respect necessary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on him.
I think I hit 7 outrights last year. I believe that 3 of them were on Cam Smith and 2 of them were on Sam Burns. It may have even been 3 on Cam Smith and 3 on Sam Burns. I can't quite remember, but I love betting Burns. And the strange thing is he never projects that well in my expected strokes gain models. He just like, he is the epitome of having the skill of knowing how to win. And it does show up in my expected win model. Like, he's probably, I want to say, somewhere around between like 15th and 20th in my expected strokes gain model. And he is tied for 5th in the expected win rate model. So an enormous difference there. So I definitely like his outright more than I do him as a DFS play. But I'd also say, like, with Burns, you can pretty much just always go with the thought, if he's contrarian, you can play him in DFS. If he's chalky, you can fade him in DFS. I even started to ignore his course fit last year, because some of the time that he spiked and won, it was when he had a bad course fit. Some of the time that he really just stunk it up was when he had a really good course fit. So he's just so volatile that I kind of lean away from the projections for him and just always play the game theory game. So for the outright, I'm pretty much always a fan, because it's just who he is. It's like he's either going to contend or he's going to be way down the leaderboard. And from a DFS perspective, I don't really have an opinion yet, because I'm just going to wait and see what his ownership is.
Yeah, so I'm not going to play him in DFS. I'm just going to play the outright. I don't think he knows what he is yet. He's young enough. I don't think that he goes out there and just plays golf every day. He doesn't know what, he doesn't care about course fit. He doesn't care about playing it safe here, not playing it safe there. I don't think he's figured that out. Interesting story just to go back on. There was a kid that I played with I was a member at Hackberry Creek in Irving for 12 years or whatever. Played golf a lot with a kid named Austin Connolly, caddied for him in the John Deere RBC. We actually got paired together in Canada in 2016. He was like 17 years old, and I'm 30, whatever, 6 or whatever at the time. And he's not playing at all anymore, but he played with Sam Burns in the first ever USGA 4-ball. So the inaugural USGA 4-ball, Austin, who I basically mentored growing up, and Sam were caddies or partners. And then I played in sectionals the next year and played a practice round with Austin, Davis Riley, Sam Burns,
Nice.
and I mean, I'm literally double their age, all of them, every single one of them. And I was like, this is not exactly the practice round pairing. And I was like, I saw those kids play and I was like, man, these kids are good, like
Yeah.
different level good back then. Now, obviously, it's easy to say somebody's good and not be on the PGA Tour. They've both, Davis and Sam have both made it. But I think Sam, as soon as he figures out more of who he is, he's going to be dominant. Like,
Yeah, from a data perspective, what I see for Sam Burns is if the driving accuracy kind of catches up to the other best players in the world, he's going to be right there. Like we can look at from Taylor Montgomery up in the DraftKings pricing, so $8,900 and up. There's only one guy who has a negative strokes gained driving accuracy baseline projection, and that's Burns at negative 0.15. In fact, everybody else is at 0.11, which is where Wise and Montgomery are, or higher. Cameron Young, as long as he is, gains 0.44 strokes per round just with his accuracy off the tee. Harmon is at 0.42. Sung Jae's at 0.6. Rahm and Scheffler are each around or above half a stroke gained per round with their driving accuracy. Even guys that you don't necessarily think of as the most accurate off the tee, Zalatoris, Finau, they're at a quarter of a stroke gained per round with their driving accuracy. That's the part for me that Sam Burns has to improve at to be one of the true elites. But the flip side there is every now and then he catches fire with his driver and is hitting it straight. And then you see the distance, he's fully able to take advantage of that. Then you see the fact that he is a world-class putter. He can get really hot with his irons. It can all come together for him when the accuracy is there. And maybe that's why he is as volatile as he is and why he can win at a really high rate, but also is going to give you some missed cuts and disappointing rounds as well.
yeah, and I'm not sure that part will ever change. Mm-hmm. I think, it may just be, hey, I'm going to go see what I have this week and I'm either going to contend or I'm not, which that's fair. That's a great way to make a living too. I mean, he's
very profitable strategy.
Yeah.
You can win 3
sure.
times a year. That's for damn
just
sure.
send it every time and I'll make my, 5 to 10 million a year and we'll be done. And then I'll get all my endorsements and have a job for the rest of my life. It's a great idea.
I'll say it's funny because for me, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that's when I started to become among the longer guys on the mini tours off the tee. And it's when I started to realize, like, if I'm going to make it or when I'm going to play really well, it's going to be because of my driver. So I just need to pull that club as often as possible, be really aggressive off the tee, and just accept the fact that if I don't have the driver working, it's not going to be my tournament. And that's just perfectly okay. And that was kind of like for me, it was a really freeing thought. And I think that kind of sparked me becoming not just one of the longer guys on the mini tours, but also one of the straighter off the tee. And if my iron play had ever come even remotely close to as good as I was off the tee, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. I might be playing in the event, but it never did. So here I am.
And I'm just the opposite. Like if I could have ever driven it good, from there in, I was, that's what I did really well. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I pitched out in my career and made par. I mean, like that's when you hit it. I hit it short and crooked and managed to do. I mean, the year that I made it through Canadian Tour School, I'm sure I made people sick. I was hitting it so short and so crooked and finished 4th. And I mean, just hitting it in the water and then holding out for par, like just doing stupid stuff.
I was 30 yards by you in the middle of the fairway and kept making bogeys.
Yeah. So, and the frustrating part is Canada should have been right up my alley and I just messed it up. So that's a different story for a different day. But yeah, I think
basically what you're saying is we got to find an alternate shot event to compete.
That's right. You hit every tee shot, I'll hit every second shot. We're fine from there. But yeah, no, I just think that the elite drivers of the golf ball are the ones that we need to value every week. But I think this week especially, I'm going to guess it's going to be very little rough like usual. Like they say there's rough, but the ball sits on top and I don't really expect anything severe. I don't know. I mean, the stadium course is obviously a different monster, which they play twice, but I would still expect, you know, you've got me turned on to Pendrith now, thinking about the way it's going to work and the way that he plays golf.
If he gets into a rhythm with his wedges, look out. Like he could go 7, 8, 9 under without really sweating.
I mean, he's not afraid. I mean, he's got a great pedigree. He's not, he's not going to be concerned with making birdies. He's not afraid to make them in a million. You mentioned one name earlier too that last one that I'm going to ask about is Taylor Montgomery. He's getting in the DFS world. Everybody is in love with him. He's become. I'm not on board at all.
Interesting.
I'll probably have my biggest head-to-head bet this week with Burns over Montgomery.
Very interesting. It's really shocking to me, honestly, how interested people are in playing Montgomery, because typically all the industry cares about is like approach play. They just want to see guys dialed in with their irons. That is not Taylor Montgomery. Even last week, he lost 1.2 strokes per round with his irons, still finished tied for 12th because he's great off the tee, solid around the green, and man, can this guy putt. So it's kind of weird, like he's not rating very well for me with his baseline expected strokes gained because of how far behind the rest of the best players in the world his iron play is. Like I have his baseline expectation as losing a quarter of a stroke per round with his irons. You just don't see guys that bad with irons anywhere near this price range, typically speaking. But I do think this course fit model benefits him. He's obviously really, really good off the tee. I also don't know, like, is he going to remain this bad with his irons, or is he going to start to find it and he's just gotten off to a slow start and has carried himself to this kind of success with his putting, with his power off the tee? Because if that's the case, then we could be looking at a guy who immediately should be considered in the same breath as like the way we do Sam Burns and Tom Kim.
Well, and so that's my point exactly with the my exact point with the head-to-head.
Mm-hmm.
Is what is his upside? It's not John Rahm. His upside is Sam Burns. So I can play Sam Burns against him, not knowing what we're getting on one side over the other. That's why I thought that. So you're trying to ride the hot hand against the proven, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I think the best that he's gonna be is another, which is a great play. I mean, what a top 15 player in the world. 20 player in the world, like that's his upside. So that's where, like, you're talking about your value with your outrights. That's where I see this head-to-head matchup is if this kid ends up being what we all think he can be, it is Sam Burns.
Mm-hmm.
So I can get Sam Burns against him.
Yeah, and I think relatively speaking, Montgomery is a better fit for the course, but Sam Burns still has the higher course fit expected strokes gained because he's better. So for context, like Montgomery, I have at 0.48 per round as a baseline number, 0.86 on these courses. Burns is 0.81 and then 0.98. So much smaller spread for Burns, but he still rates out higher even on these courses just because he's a better player. So I do like that bet a decent amount. But he's another guy that for me, like in the DFS world of things, I'm just going to wait and see what his ownership is like. Again, it surprises me that people have been on him the way they've been, and I assume that they're going to continue to ride him at this price, but it's different than the trend we've seen for most of the last few years from the industry and really just kind of riding guys who are hot with their irons.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a different world, and the amount of data that's out there now that people are looking into, and in my opinion, it goes overboard at some points to where, like, we have to remember we're playing golf, and golf is the hardest sport you'll ever play in the entire world. So there's so many variables to it. I'm gonna get outside the guy that and listen, I love Jordan Spieth, worked out in the same gym for years. I'm gonna get outside the guy that relies on making 20-footers.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is most people don't realize how good Jordan Spieth was tee to green.
Oh yeah.
He just happened to make those putts to win in the big moment, so that's what
Mhm.
everybody remembers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think that it's just a different monster nowadays, and I'm gonna look for the little advantages where I can. That being said, it's golf, and golf is hard, and literally, you never know what's gonna happen because somebody could get sick tomorrow morning. You never know. Thursday morning, somebody's mom could be sick, and they're not there, and they're just gonna be done. Somebody's girlfriend could be having a bad day and ruin their whole day, and they don't play good. Like, it's just so mental. It's not like, you're going to play quarterback and you get out there lost in the moment and everything else goes away. It's not the same.
Mhm. Well, I'll tell you what, I had a feeling we were going to go at least the full hour on this show. A lot of really fun conversation here. A few housekeeping things before we get out of here. Anyone who's not a subscriber yet, check out the Diamond package at FTN Daily or FTN Bets. The rest of the NFL playoffs, PGA, obviously, we are already full blast for the year. Baseball's right around the corner. NBA's full go. Lots going on. So check us out. And really appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.